vulnerability creates so much potential evil for children to be victimized. And so when you think about this whole issue, this is why it's so important to understand it, is that you have a child in an orphanage that's been totally abandoned. Typically they get out, if it's an institutional orphanage, they get out at 15 to 16. There is no place for them to go. There's no housing. There's nothing for them. And they are left to fend for themselves. Well, there are people who specialize on preying on those children. And so we were, in Moldova as an example, the psychologist there's 2 safe homes that we support where girls who have been rescued from trafficking and are being rehabilitated. And so she opened up the newspaper, and page after page were these ads of come work in a hotel, come work in a sauna, you can work abroad, you can be a nanny, you can do all of these things. Every single one of them had been put there by traffickers. And so we were sitting in this cafe, and it was in a nice part of town. It would be like in downtown Colorado Springs or Denver or any other nice city. And we ordered coffee, and we were talking to this lady, and because she told us she had a surprise for us. And she said, "Are you ready for your surprise?" We're like, "Sure." She said, "One of the girls who's in our safe home was trafficked from this cafe." And so we looked around, and all of a sudden we started to see, I mean, there were these strange looking men, and there were girls everywhere, and it was in the middle of mid-morning. And so this is a huge issue. I mean, we're talking millions of kids. And the other thing is that it happens right here in the United States. I mean, you know, the estimations are about 300 children trafficked in the U.S. and Canada. 14,500 to 17,000 a year, new ones a year come through. There's just an article about what's going on in Portland, where it's one of the highest rate of trafficking in the world. I mean, so this isn't something that just happens in Moldova or just happens in Russia. And so the thing that we have to do is be involved in these issues. I mean, you know, these crazy statistics you always hear, but 150 million orphans in the world is a lot. But if only 7% of people who call themselves Christians adopted, there'd be no orphans. You see, I'm a firm believer that the solution to these issues are in God's people. God is not caught off guard by this stuff. We try to find kids, orphans, vulnerable children, wherever they happen to be, whether it's in Africa or Russia. Typically, I mean, they're abandoned, they're alone, they're either institutionalized or they're head of their household orphan. Both parents have died if you're talking about an issue like Swaziland in Africa. And we come in and we work with the people who are on the ground, who already love and care for those kids but can't really do anything to help them because they can barely survive. And we have a holistic program where we meet their needs spiritually, physically, educationally, and we take them through a process until they become a leader in their community. And for some that means they get to go to university and they become lawyers and doctors, and for others it means maybe that we help them to purchase some land so that they have a farm and that they can feed their family and they can have a small business in their society. So whatever we can do to help kids, our mission is really to reach 1 million kids in the next 20 years so that we turn over this cycle of orphanhood. We mobilize churches, Christian businesses, communities, Sunday school groups, online communities, blogging communities is a big deal for us right now. And those communities actually take ownership of an orphan community, whether that happens to be an actual orphanage or a care point or a head of household orphanage. And they take responsibility for that. So they get their community involved. We do what we do with all of the communication and all the staff that we have on the ground. We give letters back and forth. We really encourage people to go. I mean, HopeChest is a relational organization, so if you're involved with us and you're involved in sponsoring an orphan somewhere, whatever that looks like, then we want you to go. And so we provide the mechanism for you to get over there and meet those kids that you see pictures of and you see some videos of from time to time. And so when we mobilize a community like that, though, that community will stick with those kids long term, and they use their gifts and their abilities to help develop whatever the needs are. So we actually work with them to strategize a development plan. And so what that might look like is that at first, if you're in Africa, kids are starving, they don't have clean water. So the first thing that they do is they help them provide food, provide the water, provide the necessary things that they'll need to survive. And then we move into other aspects of education, life skills training, job placement, whatever it looks like. We stick with them until they're successful young adults. A few years ago, I went to visit the office in Durban, South Africa, where it's the headquarters for all of Africa for Focus on the Family. And right down kind of this hill from where they were, we went and visited, and it was just horrible. I mean, 30% plus HIV/AIDS infection rate, in South Africa. These areas where it was even higher. People were in abject poverty. And so at that time we started to dream, what would it look like to be able to connect everybody who's involved with Focus in the U.S. with the people on the ground who are involved with Focus in Africa and help the poorest of the poor in those communities. And so we worked on that for a long time, and that partnership now has taken off. And so we now have staff in Durban, South Africa. We're working in partnership with Focus on both sides of the water. And it's the same concept that we were talking about earlier. It's churches, it's communities, it's blogging communities who are sponsoring orphanages and community care points in South Africa with Focus on the family. There are a number of things that those of you who are involved with Rising Voice can do to make a huge difference in the issues that we've been talking about. I mean, one is to advocate. Our voice is one of the strongest things that God has given us to make a difference in the world. One of the best ways we can use our voice is through our local communities. And those can be either people that you know, people are in your church, you can start a blog. I'm a huge advocate of a blogging platform because I've seen it be able to reach tens of thousands of people. I would strongly encourage you to say, okay, God, what are the issues that you've really caused me to be passionate about? Is it clean water? Is it orphans? Is it human trafficking? And begin to get aligned with people who are like-hearted and do something together that can make a difference. I would also strongly encourage you to get involved with an organization of like heart. So whether that's Children's HopeChest or another great organization, whatever it is that you feel passionate about, and just pick up the phone and say, listen, this is my heart, this is what I want to do. How can I advocate for you? How can I be involved? What can I do? Can I go on a trip? This is another big thing that I think in your 20s especially, you have a great opportunity to do things differently than at any other time in your life. I'm a firm believer that we are the hope of the world, that God has put these dreams in your heart for a reason. He put them in my heart for a reason because we're the answers. We're the answers that these orphans are crying out for, that girls who are being trafficked are crying out for, and we can make huge differences in the lives of people if we'll just step out in faith and say, God, how could you use me?